Turkey has airlifted troops into northern Iraq for a cross-border ground operation against Turkey's against the Kurds. The defense minister in Ankara said the offensive was launched following intense artillery fire into the area. Now, there have also been attacks against Yazidis on Mount Sinjar. These are the folks that are still on the mountain. They were targeted for genocide. And now the Turks have been targeting them. They are aggressive. And I think a part of this is the distraction, the opening that it has provided for them with all that's happening, the coronavirus, what's happening here domestically. Join me now to talk more about this, resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, Michael Rubin. He also testified recently before the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom on the needs for religious liberty in northeast Syria. Michael, welcome to Washington Watch.
Hey, thanks for having me, Tony.
Okay, what are the Turks doing? What's going on?
Well, there's two different operations here. Where they're crossing the border and putting in their ground troops is an area of rugged terrain which the PKK, the Kurdish Workers' Party, which has led an insurgency in Turkey for the past 30-plus years, is based. And this is an operation which happens from time to time, although, of course, the Iraqis are unhappy about this because it's a violation of their sovereignty. And even though the Turks will label all Kurds and the PKK insurgent group as terrorists, it's not clear that the PKK has actually taken any action against Turkey recently. Turkey seems to be just continuing its long campaign of ethnic cleansing against the Kurds. But the real problem, and what's really troubling, is what the Turks are doing on Mount Sinjar. Now, it's important to understand, Tony, when we talk about Mount Sinjar, it's not a little mountain. It's a large mountain that is about 50 miles long. And so you drive along valleys on either side of it, and on the mountain itself is where all these Yazidis live, and some of them weathered the Islamic State, but many others are the refugees, the women, the girls who have been returning from Syria, liberated from the Islamic State. They're trying to get their life together, and it's not clear why the Turks are insisting on bombarding them. It really undercuts the development, and it raises questions about whether Turkey is waging counterterrorism, and it's clear they're not, or whether they're pursuing a religious agenda, an intolerant religious agenda.
Now, Michael, many of these Yazidis on Mount Sinjar are in basically refugee camps. I mean, they're still in the recovery process from, as you pointed out, what ISIS did, and so this is traumatizing to them. I mean, they have no idea. They're isolated. I mean, we have a NATO ally. Turkey is a NATO ally. Is NATO saying anything about this?
You know, NATO isn't. NATO is being disturbingly quiet. When I was in Sinjar several months ago, right before the coronavirus hit, it was important that we not be there at night because that's when the Turkish warplanes came. And it wasn't just a matter of rebuilding houses, Tony. It's a matter this is an agricultural area. Mm-hmm. It's a matter of planting crops. And whenever the crops would grow, the Turks would bomb them and they would burn. So it is a deeply troubling scenario.
So, Michael, what should be the United States, we've got our hands full right now. I mean, the coronavirus, as you said, that stopped all travel. I mean, even the travels that USURF was taking, we've not gone anywhere. I came back from Sudan right as the outbreak was beginning. And so there's a bit of isolation taking place in terms of being able to go on the ground and see these things. But we're getting these news reports. What should our posture be here?
Well, Tony, we know from past precedent, from the time of, for example, when Pastor Brunson was held hostage inside Turkey, that if the U.S. government is willing to impose economic sanctions, eventually Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan will back down. It's essential that we actually leverage economic pressure. The other thing to keep in mind is many of the Yazidi I talked with said they have proof of life of girls and women who were seized by the Islamic State who are still in areas under Turkish control. It's essential that those economic sanctions also compel the release of those Yazidi slaves. It's important to have religious freedom in the Middle East.
Absolutely, and especially as you testified on northeast Syria. Michael Rubin, one final question for you. Just what's the bigger agenda here for Turkey? Is this just, as you said, they occasionally make these raids into northern Iraq? Is there something bigger at play here?
There's two things. First of all, Turkey under Recep Tayyip Erdogan has talked about revising the borders it's had for the past 100 years, and that's upsetting all the neighboring states. But there's also a religious agenda at play. Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the president of Turkey, essentially comes from a Muslim Brotherhood background, and he's seeking to impose his religion and his Islamism not only on Turkey's Shiites and not only on Turkey's Christians, but also the Yazidis as well, and it's important to nip this process in the bud.
All right, Michael Rubin, thank you so much for joining us today. Very, very insightful.
Thank you.